All right, guys, what's up? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. And we're doing this in real time, by the way. This is not like a pre-recording or anything like that. So this is being done in real time. And I wanted to talk about something that I believe would be a missed opportunity in terms of pubs when it comes to Splitgate 2. Because at some point in time, I'm sure there are plenty of players out there that basically said that they wish they could do this in the game, or they wish they could do that, or that the game feels very limited and very stale because of a lack of depth or whatnot. So and to a certain degree, they're actually right. But at the same time, how does Splitgate do this, right? I mean, because they've already created something like the factions and the perks and the loadout system, right? And I think there's kind of a missed opportunity at this point right now in order to add more depth and more replayability and more fun to the game as far as pubs are concerned. Now, let ranked / competitive be its own thing to where things can be implemented differently with more limitations and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's a missed opportunity over here to make the loadout system and the faction system even better, because I think they should stay. I don't think they should go, because again, one of the things is that is definitely, depending on who you talk to, especially when you're talking to the audience of Splitgate 2, some of them that are still playing the game, that are a little bit more open-minded, including the ones that did play the game and then put it down because it's like, hey, the gameplay's fun, but at the same time, it's like, there's just not enough coming back. Now, obviously, with the relaunch, we're going to have more stuff coming. We're going to have a progression system. We're going to have all this and that. However, with this idea that I'm suggesting here, which I know a lot of people are going to dislike, but I also know that a lot of people are going to like. But at the same time, this is something that can also be implemented in a playlist, if you think about it, with these changes that I'm actually going to suggest here. So now, first of all, I think the factions in and of themselves, like in terms of their ability, you get one activated ability and then you get one passive ability. I think it wouldn't be a bad thing if you were to give the player at least one more option for both these categories, but obviously not to use at the same time. That would obviously be overkill. But I'm saying, like, give them at least one more other ability to choose to which they can activate, as well as another passive ability in terms of which they can choose to activate, because more options means more replayability. And, again, every single player, whether you're a casual or a hardcore competitive player, I think we can all agree that we all have different preferences and different, different play styles to a certain extent and stuff like that. So as far as pubs go, again, I think this should be allowed to where the shackles can kind of be taken off while simultaneously keeping the balance of what Splitgate 2 is trying to offer, because the gameplay loop of Splitgate 2 is very good and very fun, but at the same time, if your loadout system is too limited, it kind of makes things stale after a really short period of time, which again, gets players to like go away. And even for someone like me who loves the game the way it is, this idea I think would amplify the fun of the game by giving more options. So there is going to be a balance to it, though. It's not going to be like crazy, or anything like that. However, it's going to help. So in my opinion, so the first thing is, again, whether you're picking Sabrask, or whether you're picking Meridian, having one more option per for players to choose one of each, I think would go a long way, and let your imagination be your guidance. Let it be, for instance, let the other ability, like for instance, here's a suggestion that I just came up with. For instance, let's say you've got the hyper sight over here, which you guys know I absolutely adore, right? And for those of you guys that are not familiar with me, I'm actually being very sarcastic about that. I think this needs to be balanced. But with that being said, why can't you have an ability that literally counters this? So if you got your hyper sight ability, why don't you have a defensive version of the move to where it's like, okay, somebody activates their hyper sight, wham bam, you can have an anti-hyper sight that counters this. Why not? So again, same thing goes with wellness. I mean, again, let your imagination roam or whatnot. I'll leave that up to the devs and stuff like that if they even take this into consideration. So again, same thing here with the arrows, same deal. You've got one activated ability, one passive ability. Add something else. You know what I mean? So I think that would go a long way. Now, that's as far as the factions are concerned. Now, let's take this a step further. I don't think the primary and secondary weapons should be locked depending on whatever faction you choose. I think step one is that you should be able to mix and match. However, if you choose a certain kind of weapon, regardless of whatever faction, which obviously would not be locked, I think that what would be interesting is if the attachments stay the same, right? So let's say you choose the tempo. Let's say you decide to choose the Sabrask, right? Which is basically this guy here. But you don't want this for your assault rifle. Let's say you prefer, the tempo, right? Which is perfectly fine, right? Let's say you prefer the tempo. So you got your Sabrask with the abilities of the Sabrask, you know, because those can't be mixed. Those should be locked. Like the abilities for every faction should be locked, right? But again, you pick your options or whatnot. But again, you've got your tempo, because you want to mix the Sabrask ability with stuff like that with the tempo. Now, the tempo weapon attachments should stay the same. They shouldn't be locked. They should be the same kind of attachments that you should have for the tempo. You pick two. And then again, let's say let's say you love the Sabrask secondary and you want that to be your secondary, or let's just say you want the Meridian secondary, right? Let's say you want the burst pistol, because we all love the burst pistol, right? I think we can all agree on that, if not most of us. We love this burst pistol. It's kind of like a primary, right? So let's say you put that into your thing as well, right? So you've got your Sabrask with the tempo, and then you've got your secondary, which is the Meridian burst pistol, right? Okay. And as well as the attachment that you choose from that within the limitations of the burst pistol itself. Okay. So again, depending on which weapon you choose, yes, those attachments for that weapon would be locked, but with the faction, they wouldn't be locked, right? So that makes it very interesting right there. And then let's take this a step further, right? So you've got perks that are locked to every single faction. My suggestion is that the perks and equipment should not be locked to every single faction. However, you still have a limit of 2. And if you were to add in one more choice, okay, fine. A limit of 3 perks and 1 equipment, that's fine too. But I think 3 might be too much. But at the same time, if you have the ability to mix match, it's great. So let's say we have our tempo with our Sabrask faction, and then the Meridian burst pistol. And then over here, let's say we don't want a stim shot. Let's say we want something else, whether it's one of these, or let's say we want an equipment from the Sabrask, right? Because we love the sticky grenade, right? Let's say we like the Sabrask sticky grenade. We got that. But let's say we don't want these 2 perks. What if we were given the ability to pick any perks from any faction, right? What if that was unlocked to where you were only limited to 2, because you have to have balance. You're only limited to 2, but you can pick any perk you want from any faction. Because again, let's say you don't want any of these perks with your gear. Let's say you don't want this, or let's just say you want one of them, but you want to mix with something else. Because let's say you don't want this. Let's just say you don't want overclock. Let's say you wanted to pick, like, let's say for instance, the perk, let's say eye for equipment that lets you see perks through walls or something like that, or unblinking. Or let's say you wanted to pick something from arrows, like Speedy Slayer, or you love that slide. What if you could choose a Sabrask that also has that amazing slide, right? What if you can mix and match that? I personally think that something like this would go a long way. And again, the balance is still there, because if you're limited to just 2, that's what balances it out. You're not going crazy to where you're picking, let's say 4 or 5 or 6 or something like that. I would say, maybe, have an open mind to let people allow to choose from 3. But again, allowing that option for the mixing and matching, I think would go a long way, because it would give depth in terms of what people's setups are, as well as how they can play. Have you not, at least at one point in during the lifetime of Splitgate 2, I'm sure the devs have heard this at some point, haven't they heard people say, man, I wish I could use the Arrows faction, right? Because I like these abilities or whatnot. Or let's say they take my theory into consideration to where they add one more thing. Like, I love this ability. I love the arrows. I love the way the arrows works, even looks. Like, I like this look of the character, but man, I wish I could choose a different assault rifle. Let's say I can mix it with the Sabrask assault rifle, and then like, let's say a perk from Meridian, or a secondary from Meridian, as well as another perk from, like, let's say Sabrask, right? What if you were able to choose that? Like, or at the very least, right? Let's just say I am completely out of my mind, and this would basically knock things way too out of balance, which I personally don't think so in terms of pubs, right? Let's just say I'm completely out of my mind, and this would be something that would be very too off balance for the game. What if we just took it a step further to where it's like, let's open up the floodgates a little bit and let players, pick and choose. You know what I mean? What I mean in terms of like for instance, what if you were to mix and match, the perks and the equipments for this, and they all had like, and they were in a category, and you got to pick, between one of 3 categories. You had to pick one from the 3 categories or whatnot, right? So I'm just saying, I think that there's a way, and again, this is my suggestion in terms of the way I presented it. I think, especially if you introduced a loadout system like this and a faction system like this, why not let the full potential of what this could be, and allowing players to literally mix and match and play how they want to play within the factions and the weapons and stuff like that. Like, giving the players options really does go a long way. I think it adds depth to the game, and a different level of fun to the game. And at the same time, I think we can all agree that pubs needs to be a more fun and crazy, and even to a certain degree, different experience from competitive. I think we can all agree on that. And I think this would be something that would appeal to both hardcore and non-hardcore players, right? But at the end of the day, from a casual perspective, I think this is something that could go a long way. And does it change anything in terms of what makes the basics of Splitgate 2 amazing? No, it doesn't. And again, when you limit something like this, to only allowing players to pick, let's say, 2 or at the most 3 different perks and stuff like that, and again, unlocking those weapons, from the factions and just letting people mix and match, again, this could go a long way. I know people that, are there's definitely people out there that are going to roast me for suggesting something like this. But again, when you're looking at it from the other side, and when you're looking at it from the fun factor standpoint, everything like that, I mean, again, this is something that should at least be taken into consideration, and at the very least should be possibly, thrown into a playlist to where it's like, okay, you can have like a loadout change in terms of how the system works in a separate playlist, right? And we're going to be having tests, and that's what I mean, like play tests playlists. We're going to be having a bunch of those coming in the next weeks, in a few weeks and months and stuff like that. I think this would be something that could be very, very viable. Like, it's like, okay, let's say you're playing team deathmatch and you're allowed to, mix and match. I think this would be something that would be a lot more fun for a lot of people. And sometimes in theory, something could sound way off, but then when you play it, it could be really good. Just like vice versa, something on paper can sound good, but at the same time, when you play it, it absolutely sucks. So what I'm suggesting is at least let's put this in a play test, right? To where to see how it goes and how people like it and how people give feedback. Because until we actually try it and play it out, we'll just never know from a firsthand experience, because everything right now is in theory. So I think this would be a great idea for pubs. So, but with that being said, let me know in the comment section down below. And if there's any other suggestions that you guys would like to add to this, again, the devs are watching, and, adding feedback to this would be great. But yeah, I think this would be a whole hell of a lot of fun. So with that being said, guys, as always, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. Let me know in the comment section what you think, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.